I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today, and this is Capitol Download. We're in the Senate office of Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, and chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Senate Republicans last week blocked a bill supported by Senator Elizabeth Warren and others to help students who had big loans refinance that loans at lower rates. You have another approach in mind to help kids who are trying to get student loans. What is it?
Susan, what we're going to be doing at the Finance Committee is opening up a campaign to put debt in its place. It seems to me we're always going to have the challenge of some debt, but what's going on now is these debts are just smothering our students.
And how would you go about doing it?
First of all, it seems to me we've got to come up with ways to make it easier for working class families to save and to plan for the future. And right now we've got just a crazy quilt of programs. It's often very hard to sort them out. You've got a whole host of them that families try to wade through, and clearly we ought to simplify them and consolidate them as part of tax reform. We understand that a lot of these families are already walking on a tightrope, balancing their food bill against their fuel bill and their fuel bill against the rent bill. So it's very hard. But let's try to take some common sense steps to get families started. For example, when they do make a modest commitment to save, let's not slap them with all these asset restrictions when they want to be eligible, for example, for some hunger assistance.
It's famously hard now to get something through this Congress. Do you think it is realistic? What do you think is realistic to think about getting done this year, meaning passing both houses of Congress and being legislation that President Obama would sign?
First, I mentioned the tax extenders, which has crucial measures in it. These are important measures. I believe they must pass this year. Second bill we'll be working on is the transportation bill. I mean, you can't have big league economic growth with little league transportation, so we're going to have to pass that this year. And then third, I very much want to change this dysfunctional system of reimbursing physicians under Medicare. Those are the three that I think have a realistic chance of passing this year and being a springboard to bigger reforms in 2015.
You have been raising concerns about U.S. surveillance programs for a decade and more. Since Edward Snowden's disclosures began last year, a lot more is known. Has anything changed since then?
I think Americans are catching on to this. I describe this collection of all these phone records on law-abiding Americans as a federal human relations database. What it is, when the government knows who you called, if they know who Susan called, when you called, and often where you called from, the government knows a tremendous amount about an individual. I mean, if the government knows that some person, called a psychiatrist 3 times in 36 hours, once after midnight, how can anyone say that that's not something that might affect your privacy?
Are you disappointed by President Obama's leadership on this issue since he became president?
We've had some spirited discussions on the topic, and certainly the president has been moving in our direction.
So you're renowned these days for having spoken up about this early on and said, there are programs I can't tell you about, you'd be alarmed about them if you knew, saying this before the Snowden disclosures. And I'm wondering, are the programs that concern you most, are they now out basically in the public domain, or would you be able to make a speech like that again today saying there are things I can't tell you about because of classification and secrecy, but there are things I'm alarmed about, you would be alarmed about them if you knew?
There's plenty more to do, but I do think that we're starting to make some progress, and I'll give you an example. The new head of the NSA is Admiral Rogers. He came in to see me. We had a very tough discussion, very blunt, very direct, and he indicated to me that he saw that the American people now, there was an enormous reservoir of distrust, and he made it clear that we will not have any more of these flagrant misrepresentations on his watch. You can go, for example, to YouTube, and you can see Admiral Rogers' predecessor, Keith Alexander, say, and I think I'm quoting it verbatim, "We do not hold data on U.S. citizens." Susan, that is one of the most false statements ever made about U.S. surveillance. Now, when Admiral Rogers came in to see me, he was going to be Keith Alexander's successor. He made it clear that he was going to be a straight shooter, and I think that's a step in the right direction.
The House Intelligence Chairman, Mike Rogers, has said that he believes Edward Snowden had help from foreign intelligence services, specifically the Russians. And I wondered, but there hasn't been public evidence of that. Do you think that's true?
This is a debate that should not have been started by a contractor. This is a debate that should have started with the intelligence leadership being straight with the American people.
Has this debate, though, been a good one to have?
I think any time in our country when we get more information out, the answer is yes. In America, the truth always comes out.
Given that officials, including the president, say there's been a lot of damage done from these disclosures, has this still been a good thing, do you think?
It's a dangerous world. I'm for vigorously collecting information about ISIS, this new threat that we have in the Middle East. But the idea that we should just keep building bigger and bigger haystacks full of records about law-abiding, Americans in order to find that needle, if anything, a lot of the information suggests to me it makes it harder to do because you're spending all your time looking in the phone records of law-abiding people.
Not a lot of bipartisanship on Capitol Hill. You do have a bipartisan caucus, I guess, on this set of issues.
The reality is neither side in January of 2015 are going to have enough votes to have it all their way. In other words, you won't have 60 votes to just tell other people, let's do it our way. So you're going to have to build, coalitions. And my judgment is when you're talking about major issues, tax reform, putting student debt in its place, the kind of thing that we're talking about, Medicare reform, you better build some common ground.
Are Americans safer today because we've had that debate in a more public way, in a more serious way than they were before?
I certainly think that this debate has been good. It has not compromised, American security. Bringing Americans into a debate, doing it in a transparent way, I think, yes, makes us stronger at home, stronger, abroad, and people are starting to see the ramifications. Yes, I think getting this information out has helped to show, once again, just as the Founding Fathers said so eloquently years and years ago, that liberty and security are not mutually exclusive.
Senator Ron Wyden, thanks for joining us on Capitol Download.
Thank you.